time. But yeah, the great kangaroo, you've got a deep dive for us, mate. Let's go. Let's get deep in the stat. Let's get the numbers out, baby.
Locked myself deep in Mum's basement yesterday, and pretty crazy. Obviously, this year we've seen that there's been less points scored. Games have been closer, which off the back of last year has been fantastic. So last year in the first 3 rounds, the teams that won, they averaged 28 points per game. Yeah, in the first 3 rounds last year. It was the same the year before that under the new rules. This year, teams that are winning, they're averaging 23 points.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's about a try less in the first 3 weeks. Teams that lost, the last 2 years, they've averaged 10 points. This year, they're averaging 14.
Okay.
So the gap has closed there quite a bit. Over the last 10 years, which is as far back as I went, the average differential is about 16 points per game in the first 3 rounds. This year, it's 9.
How good's that?
So
That's
over
mad.
the last 10
love that,
years,
So
it's
good.
the average differential in the first 3 weeks has never been a 1 to 12 score.
Wow.
It's always been 13 plus. This year, it's down to 9.
So good.
To go a little bit deeper, this year, there's 1 undefeated team left, Penny Panthers. There's 1 team with no wins, the West Tigers. It's the first year that there's only been 1 undefeated team after 3 weeks in 8 years.
Wow.
No wins, the Tigers. Last year at the end of round 3, there was 3 teams without a win. The year before that, there was 4 teams. So what it means that right now, after round 3, there's 14 teams in this competition that either have 1 or 2 wins.
Yeah.
Last year, there was 11. The year before that, there was 10. There's never been more than 13 in the last decade.
Wow. Wow. So we're basically experiencing the most exciting footy in a while, in the sense that, like, you're in games.
It's the most competitive competition in a decade by a long way.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's awesome.
That's so
And I mean,
good.
when you look at the Tigers, who are the only team without a win, on average, the team coming last with no wins at the end of round 3, over the last decade, their average for and against is minus 56. The Tigers is minus 36. They're actually the best team of the last decade to not have a win.
Wow.
So even the bottom team
Yeah, wow.
is the best of all those teams that have been really unsuccessful in that time. And obviously, you know, it comes down to who plays who. For example, we had the Warriors and the Tigers play each other this
Yeah.
week. If they would have played different opposition and lose, that's different, but it's the way the draw goes. You could also argue that maybe rains play a factor. Have had a lot of wet games, but mate, for the differential to go from 17 last year on average to 9,
Yeah.
it's halved.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's massive.
mad.
Like, when you're talking about numbers like that, it's much more dramatic than it may seem. Like, when you say, oh, it's only 7 points or 8 points or whatever, 8 points on an average is much bigger than 8 points by itself. You know what I mean?
Across 24 games.
That's
it's
crazy,
huge.
crazy. I mean, that's so good. And what's really interesting is, in the off-season, we did discuss how we felt that the lower teams had recruited really well and brought up their standard compared to the top teams, where, you know, they maybe didn't make as much of a leap, which is fair enough there at the top. Wow, that's interesting. Really interesting. And you can feel it too.
Oh, mate, this year, the teams that have won so far, all their points together is 563. It's the first time it's been under 600 in a decade.
Wow. How good's that?
And it's well and truly under 600. It's 40 points under.
Yeah, which is a lot. Fuck, that's a good...
I'm picturing you in Mama's basement, actually. What's that movie where Russell Crowe's like doing the numbers? I was
A
sitting
Beautiful
there, I know
Mind.
Maddie's going to cut this clip. I was sitting there just like, oh, yeah.
With the rain man shit going on, yeah.
Mate, the Hangover, when he's
that's
coming
it.
down the fucking escalators, the great Gurino.
But we've got a close competition. We've got an exciting competition.
Yeah.
I mean, the Warriors and the Tigers, I would say that at the moment they've been the most disappointing sides. I still find it hard to tip against them next week, whoever they're playing. The Tigers play the Titans next week. I'm going to tip the Titans, but I'm not hyper confident.
Are we transitioning into the new game, Guru? The new rules, the new style of football, is that what you think?
Oh, it'll be interesting to see in 6 weeks' time once coaches have more time to work it out.
See,
whether
I just think we've taken a step back. Like, let's say we took 2 steps away from the old game. I think we've taken 1 step back and we've met somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, agree.
Especially those penalties in the first 40. It's helped so much.
Well, that's the other thing as well. When you consider, like, compared to the last 2 years, you know, obviously heightened scores and everything, but the 6 years before that, we weren't getting sin bins like we are now. Yeah, and we've seen the impact that they have on games.
Yeah.
Dragons, for example, they had a sin bin. All of a sudden, they're down 18-0 when it was
I'd love
0-all.
to see
Like,
that.
when you consider how many sin bins are happening and the influence that has on our game, and the differential is still just 9 points. I mean, the Knights played the defending premiers, who are the only undefeated team on the weekend, and lost by, 16 points or something? Like,
With a
it's
man down.
crazy. They imagine if the Knights lost a player in the 25th minute last year to the Penrith Panthers. It would have been a cricket score.
60, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
it's-
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. Wow. It's great. It's so good. And I think round 1 or 2, we did discuss how it felt like the comp was more competitive. It felt like, the teams weren't just blowing other teams. Like, even you look at the Knights Panthers, the last 20, obviously the Panthers ran away with it. But like 60 minutes of that game, even when they were a man down, was a cracking game. And I think it proved the Knights were actually, are the real deal of a top 8 side.
And if you have a look at this weekend, just this weekend alone, which is a third of our numbers here, the average differential was 13. So across the first 2 weeks, it's been even lower than 9.
Far out. Wow. That's awesome. It's so
Crazy.
good. So they've got, now
what we
we'll probably see coaches, get even more used to the 40-metre tackle, all that kind of stuff. But right now, it looks like we've got the game in some of the best shape it's been in quite a while. Because like there's a period there with the wrestle where it's just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
man, just shoot me now. It's just so boring. Great insight, Kangaroo.
Yes,
Great
good
insight.
work, my man.
Now, time for the teams of the week. This was so fucking hard.